Lauren works as the Community and Programs Coordinator for EmotionsBC, focusing on the operations and growth of their groups and programs, as well as the development of close relationships with community partners in order to bridge the gaps in our healthcare systems. In her efforts to support her own emotional well-being and increase her capacity to support her friends and family, Lauren has developed a deep love for connection, learning, listening, and has found a passion for helping others discover the benefits of self-care. And today, Lauren will be speaking on the topic of the power of connection, support skills, and self-care for families and caregivers. And I will hand it over to you, Lauren.
Thank you, Bailey. Yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining today and for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit more about our organization and sort of what we offer here at EmotionsBC. And really, yeah, just what we're all about here as an organization of families and caregivers who are really trying to promote, self-care and wellness and just trying to bring people together who have similar experiences of having loved ones who struggle with emotional dysregulation. So I will bring up my screen. Just bear with me. All right. So yes, welcome. Thank you so much for joining today. Again, my name is Lauren. I am the Community and Programs Coordinator for EmotionsBC. I've been with EmotionsBC since about 2019. I used to be a volunteer for EmotionsBC and then have now moved into the position of our community and programs coordinator, which has just been absolutely amazing. So I'm very grateful to be a part of this organization and to share a little bit more about sort of what we do and what we offer to our community. I just want to first start off with saying that I want to gratefully acknowledge that I am presenting today from the shared unceded traditional territory of the Katzie, Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, and other Coast Salish peoples. And I'm grateful to be able to work, play, and learn on these lands. As much as I have a professional connection to EmotionsBC, I also have been a participant at some point, having a loved one, actually several loved ones who struggle with emotional dysregulation, and myself, who is a kind of call myself highly sensitive person or a super feeler. So I do have big feelings myself. My brother has faced pretty chronic anxiety for most of his life and suffers with depression as well at times. And I also have another family member who has had received a borderline personality disorder diagnosis in his life, as well as a schizophrenia diagnosis. So I myself, have been able to move throughout the world with people around me who have big feelings and myself. And I'd love to be able to share a little bit more just the benefits of taking care of yourself and using some of these skills that we'll talk about today. To set the scene, I just wanted to share a story from a family that has participated in our groups and programs before, and sort of the story of how they came to find these skills. Through our groups and programs, we share skills from dialectical behavioral therapy and emotion-focused therapy, and we kind of base these skills and sort of deliver them in a way that makes sense to families and caregivers. So I'll read this story for everyone and then we'll move forward. So when our young children both found themselves in the midst of severe mental health crises, it felt like we lost everything overnight. We lost our dreams, our kids' futures, and dreams of our own futures. There was no peace in our home, and our most important relationships were fractured. Perhaps the most devastating loss was that we were no longer believing in ourselves as parents. We were a family in crisis, and we knew that we needed help for ourselves on this journey. It was important for us to find a place where we didn't feel blamed for our children's conditions and where we didn't feel like we failed as parents. And that's when we came across EmotionsBC. At first, they provided a non-judgmental space. We needed to share our story and connect with other parents and caregivers of people with mental health challenges. Above all this, the team at EmotionsBC provided something that has become a critical part of our lives: dialectical behavioral therapy skills. Before my children received their diagnoses and subsequent treatment plans, I never heard of DBT. It's the primary and only treatment that's known for borderline personality disorder. I've since learned that DBT skills are for the individual with BPD and can also be very helpful for loved ones of those who are suffering from it. We enrolled in the EmotionsBC Essential Skills course, which gave us an introduction to DBT at exactly the right level. This course was taught by someone who was familiar with using these skills in their own lives, and they were able to share relevant, practical skills that we could use to put in our own relationships. I now have more firm boundaries with my children, which makes me feel safer. I'm more open and accepting of the situation my family is in. And I'm learning through a skill called radical acceptance, not trying to fix things all the time. When our family was in crisis, EmotionsBC was there to catch us and hold us up. I think this story goes for a lot of our group's participants and also for myself as well. Using these skills in my life has helped me incredibly with just my own confidence and my own boundary setting and my own self-care. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about some more information on effective skills for communication and emotional regulation. So sort of the effective skills, what they are, how we can use them, and why it's important to use them. The importance of self-care for ourselves as family members and caregivers, and also how we can support you at EmotionsBC with your journey with your loved ones and also with your own self-care journey. Have you ever felt completely overwhelmed by what's going on around you, your thoughts and your feelings, like they're taking over your entire mind and body? For people living with borderline personality disorder and other severe emotional dysregulations, this is something that can be a daily occurrence. Emotional dysregulation is more than having just big feelings. It's when those feelings become persistent and intense and sometimes feeling unbearable. It's when things like anger or fear or sadness or shame come over us in waves, and it makes it nearly impossible to respond to our surroundings. And as family members and caregivers, it's incredibly difficult to witness a loved one struggling in this way. We might feel confused or helpless or frustrated or, wondering, why me? Why is this happening to my family? And for some of us, it feels nearly impossible to not try to take away that pain. And that's sort of what we're going to focus on today, is those practical skills that can help us respond with compassion and with setting boundaries, and to also take care of ourselves when we're supporting our loved ones. It's really important to understand that sometimes when our loved ones are emotionally dysregulated, it can almost feel like they're at a brick wall, right? Their brains are maybe offline, or even this can happen to us, right? When we hit that sense of burnout, it can feel like we're offline. And this can feel incredibly frustrating and scary and hopeless. Sort of staring at this immovable object of a brick wall, feeling like there's no way to overcome it. And for some, the feeling of emotional burnout from our loved ones can come across in a number of different ways. It might look like isolating themselves, having difficulty getting a job or staying in school, or even experiencing a hard time keeping track of like appointments or tasks or, self-care and things like that. And this is where perspective is so important. Our loved ones may be experiencing something completely different to what we might be witnessing or what we think we understand they're going through. If you take this image, for example, there's two people looking at a number on the floor, and one of them saying it's a 6 and the other saying it's a 9. They're both right, aren't they, in their own way? From the perspective of the person on the left, it looks like a 6, and on the right, there's a 9. And this really just shows that, two opposing truths. can exist at the same time. And this is basically dialectics in essence. This is the D in DBT, right? It's a huge part of understanding perspective and understanding that there is no absolute truth. So, how do we use dialectics in our conversations with our loved ones or even in our perspective taking? Well, a great way that I've learned how to use dialectics is replacing the word but with the word and. And I'm not even kidding, this was life-changing for me and for my family. When we think of the word but, it really does negate whatever precedes it, right? And think about how it would feel to hear the following sentence and just feel the difference of the two. I love you, but it's not okay to talk to me that way. How about trying, I love you, and it's not okay to talk to me that way? It's just those small little bits of our conversations that can sometimes change the entire dynamic of our connection with our loved ones, right? We're still saying, I love you. And we're also setting the boundary that it's not okay to talk to me that way, right? Instead of saying, I love you, but this behavior is way worse than, like my love for you. And it just completely changes the way that that feels. And a quick thing to note as well, however, is just a fancy way of saying but. So we try to avoid using the howevers as well, even though it feels a little bit better than the word but. So then the next skill that I want to talk about is mindfulness. And this is sort of what we call the first step in using our skills. To define mindfulness, it's basically a state of being fully mentally present in the moment while acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations and being aware of judgment. Notice how he's saying not having judgment, it's aware of judgment. Mindfulness is about observing. And this is one way we can check in with our bodies and our minds when we're having conversations with our loved ones. I like to show this picture here. It's one of my favorite images and visuals for my visual learners out there. If we take a look at this image, we see on the left-hand side, there's a person who's walking their dog, and we see what's going on inside their mind, right? You can see things like bills coming through the door and driving, maybe stressed out about traffic, all the work that they have to do. And on the right-hand side, we see the dog and what their perspective is, just taking in the world as it is. And that moment, in essence, is mindfulness. That's taking things how they are for what they are in this exact moment. So what are some of the benefits, right? It's been proven that mindfulness is one of the most extremely effective skills in people's lives for a number of reasons. Makes it easier to savor life's pleasures. It can help us change our perspective on pain, decreases our stress, allows for more fulfilling relationships and connections, and it can help us to be more focused on this moment. Have you ever noticed yourself sort of not paying attention to your friends or your family and sort of almost staring at them with blank looks at times? It happens to me. I do kind of zone out in that way or sometimes disassociate when I'm talking to my loved ones because I have so much else going on in my brain. But using mindfulness helps us when our mind sort of wanders and brings us back to the present so that we can be more genuine and have a stronger connection with those that we're communicating with. And it helps us not become so overwhelmed as well. And why is this important? Well, when we live in the past, we can often fall into feelings of depression or guilt or regret, right? We might regret things that we did or didn't do and wish that we could go back to a time when things were maybe different. And it's hard to not dwell and ruminate on those past experiences. And alternatively, living in the future is really no more effective, right? It can cause us to become extremely anxious. We might find ourselves worrying about the future, trying to plan for things, overthinking all the time. But when we're mindful, it really allows us to find those moments of peace because the present is really the only time that we will find peace. A big step to this is using the skill of radical acceptance. This is one of the biggest keys to mindfulness or doing mindfulness effectively. Radical acceptance is when you stop fighting reality, stop responding with impulsive or destructive behaviors when things aren't going the way that you want them to, and letting go of ill feelings that may be keeping you trapped in a cycle of suffering. This picture sums up mindfulness and radical acceptance in a perfect way, and it gets me a good laugh every time I take a look at it. On the left-hand side, we have it's raining. I don't like rain. I wish it wasn't raining. My day would be better if it wasn't raining. Everything's ruined. Why does it always rain? I just want it to be sunny. And on the right-hand side, we have it's raining. Yep. And that's all it is. That's the essence of acceptance. And it really showcases what it's like to be in the moment and without judgment. Acceptance also doesn't mean that we have to be okay with what's happening in the moment or agree with it or even understand it. It's just accepting that this is what reality is. And now we have the choice of choosing to move forward and to grow and learn and maybe even if we need to come up with a solution for something. A really great way to practice acceptance as well is understanding our areas of control and influence. Sometimes it's called like the circles of control or the circles of influence or circles of responsibility. But in essence, it's on the outside, there's everything that we can't control, you know, gas prices, there's just so many different things that come to mind. And then there's what we can influence, which is, you know, the people in our lives. We can have influence on them, and it is also their choice how they take that influence that we sort of have. And then there's also what we can control, and that's the stuff that's in the middle, and it's really us, right? It's our thoughts, it's our feelings, it's our behaviors, and it's our actions. And at the end of the day, it can be really liberating to let go of things that are on those outer circles because we really don't have control over them. So, how are we using dialectics, perspective, and mindfulness for effective empathy and validation? To define empathy, it's basically the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. And we really believe this is the first skill to use when we're trying to de-escalate a situation or connect with our loved ones. The brilliant Brene Brown quotes empathy as it's empathy fuels connection and sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy and sympathy are often grouped together and they're very different, right? Empathy is that inclusive way of connecting with someone, whereas sympathy can create this divide, this uneven balance of, you know, almost a power dynamic, which can lead to further feelings of isolation and disconnection. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of times we have really good intentions for sympathizing with someone, when in reality, people just want to feel like, you know, we're equals and we're on the same level and holding space together. There's many ways to express empathy. We can do it through touch, we can do it through our tone, we can do it through the words that we say. But the biggest and most important thing to make sure that we're doing is making sure that it's genuine, right? Whatever we do, whatever we say, we want it to be genuine and make sure that we are not trying to change anything that's in this moment. Now, once we understand what it means to hold space for someone through empathy, this is where we can really bring in validation because these two skills really do go hand in hand. Validation does sort of two things and a lot more things as well. But it also it really starts with identifying a specific emotion and then offering validation or justification for that feeling and emotion. And it's also really simple to understand and difficult to put into practice. So we all kind of know what validation means usually, but it's one of those skills that's really takes time to develop and can often be easiest if you sort of practice it on friends and family. What we're validating is the person and the emotion, not the behavior that our loved ones might be experiencing or exuding. And this is a common misconception with validation, that if we validate someone's feelings, we're enabling or we're, allowing certain behavior to take place. And that's not the case. The validation is important because people's feelings need to be met first. Some ways that we can validate are by saying, you must be so overwhelmed. Really, the wow is one that can be really impactful. A wow and a pause, allowing that space to exist. Or, saying you really sound excited about this. Celebrating things with our loved ones. But notice here, highlighted in orange, they're all the feeling tones, right? All the feeling words. We're identifying the emotions and the feelings. And just as much as validating others is important, it's so important to validate ourselves. Um, these sentences are ones that I feel like we have a really hard time saying to ourselves. My feelings are valid. It's normal for me to feel this way. I'm doing a good job. I'm enough. I trust my opinions and I trust myself and I'm proud of myself. And self-validation really is just as important as validating others. The next skill, to sort of wrap up the list of skills that we talk about in our groups and programs, is boundaries. And this is really, in essence, understanding where we end and where our loved ones begin. I'd like to start off by giving a couple of definitions because they can really look different depending on the person. A boundary is something that indicates bounds or limits. A boundary is a limit or space between you and the other person, a clear place where you begin and the other person ends. The purpose of setting a healthy boundary is, of course, to protect and take good care of you. And to put it short and sweet from Brene Brown, it's what's okay and what's not okay. So you might be wondering why boundaries are so important. Well, they're a huge part of self-care, right? And also an equally as big part of healthy relationships. Some of the most compassionate people are the most boundaried, again, to quote Brene Brown. It determines how we want to be treated and promotes positive mental health. And it also helps to define our own individuality as loved ones and as people who, are supporting someone who struggles with emotional dysregulation. It helps us to avoid anger and resentment and burnout, protects our time, and it protects our energy. And they're controlled by us for us. So we sort of stick with 3 words when we're talking about boundaries. And oftentimes people will come to us and they say, I can't get boundaries right. I don't know why it doesn't work for me. I can never seem to get boundaries to work. And oftentimes they're missing one of these 3 steps, because without each of these playing into each other, boundaries are not effective. The first thing we need to do is establish the boundaries. We then need to communicate them in a clear and kind way, and then honor them. And it's really hard to honor your boundaries if you haven't, communicated them, or it's really hard to maintain your boundaries if you didn't properly establish them. There's all of these different parts that they just are so enmeshed, and they really need to be, each step needs to be supported and taking the time to look at what your values are and look at, what is the purpose of putting this boundary into place. So another way we can look at how to establish boundaries, we can use the example of, I know for myself and for some of the other people in my life, having like our phone on silent after a certain part of the night, or not even answering the phone after a certain time of night. We can determine that the issue that we're finding most disruptive is that, texts and phone calls throughout the night are disruptive to sleep. They inhibit me from being able to do my job the next day. You can then sort of explore the boundary that you'd like to be set. I'd like to be in bed by 9 p.m. and have 2 hours to myself prior to the time that I shut my eyes and go to sleep. Then really understanding why that boundary is important to you. So an example, this way I'll be able to have more peaceful downtime before bed and then better the next day when I have a good night's sleep. So why are these skills important? Well, when we look at an unskilled interaction, we see that both of like, our loved ones and us bring our beliefs and integrity and perspective into a conversation. We then have an interaction, and then emotional dysregulation can happen. And this can lead our loved ones to feeling shameful, misunderstood, maybe angry or doubted, and can cause us to judge and feel helpless and confused and fearful. And this often leads to resentment and regret. And then we also have a skilled interaction. And this is really what our goal is, right? This takes practice, but we can still bring our beliefs and our perspectives and our personalities, bring those skills into the interaction, the validation, the empathy, the acceptance, the boundaries. And in turn, that emotional dysregulation time might be less and less, which can lead to our loved ones feeling cared for and understood. They might still feel angry and they might still feel loved. We can also feel more caring and respected and empathetic. And this is really where we get that connection. Next, moving on to self-care and why it's so important. Self-care is the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness. When we aren't putting ourselves first, it can be really tiring to go through life. And we call it a practice because it's something that we have to maintain. And we also want to note that what works for you and what doesn't work, what works for you and what doesn't work for you might look different depending on the person. I know for myself, self-care, can look different. It's not always lighting a candle or having a hot drink. I actually don't love hot drinks. So maybe something more effective for me would be playing my guitar or going for a walk, right? It can kind of look different and you can get creative with, experimenting in your self-care. But the biggest thing that we want to highlight is how important it is to put on your own oxygen mask first. We listen to the airline attendants when they say this, right? Putting on your own oxygen mask first before trying to help your kids or other people next to you. But the reality is that we can't help others if we don't have our own supply of oxygen. And really modeling this behavior for our loved ones can be super important for overall well-being for the rest of our life. So moving on now, just to wrap up, I wanted to share what we offer at EmotionsBC to help you foster these skills and maybe dive into them a little bit more through our groups and programs, because we are a peer support organization and we all have lived experience with our loved ones. Just to share quickly where our organization came to be. The picture on the right there is of Nicole Taylor. She's our founder and executive director. And in her words, in 2018, I founded EmotionsBC to help families and caregivers of people with mental health challenges of all kinds to come together to access information, skills, resources, and peer support. By offering people the chance to connect and share their experiences in a safe, judgment-free space, my goal has always been to reduce stigma, isolation, and guilt that so often comes hand in hand with mental illness. Our mission at EmotionsBC is to improve emotional health and wellness for families and their loved ones. And we do this through our values of compassion and empathy, community awareness, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And basically our services are all as barrier-free as possible. The only skills that require a little small deposit that you can get back is our essential skills program and our mindfulness workshops. But our peer support and skills groups take place monthly. They're a great way to connect with other families and caregivers who have experience with loved ones struggling with their mental health. And our Essential Skills program is a 6-week program that offers, again, all the skills that we talked about in today's presentation and more. And this is delivered sort of over that longer format so that we can really dive into the skills and share experiences. As well, our mindfulness workshops are in person and they're half day workshops that really help us take that extra level of self care and just really diving into that one particular skill because it really is so effective in our own our own emotional regulation. So here's where you can find us. We're on Facebook, Instagram at emotionsbc.ca. And if you want to reach me about anything, again, me being the community and programs coordinator, I can be reached at any time at Lauryn at emotionsbc.ca. And thank you so much for letting me present.
Thanks so much, Lauren. I really appreciated that conversation. And there was a lot of things that resonated with what I've done in DBT and also the skills that my mom's also learned to support me. So I really do appreciate that. Um, okay. Just one moment here. So we do have a couple of questions from the chat. Is your Essentials programs online or in person?
Yeah, so we currently offer our Central Skills program online as our 6 week format. We're still trying to gain some interest for having this group take place in person. So if anyone is interested in taking it in person, we often run our in-person support and skills groups in Langley. So that's most likely where we would run the Essential Skills program. So once we sort of have an interest list built, we'll for sure try to put it on in person.
Okay, yeah, great. And I was curious for myself, we support a lot of families that have youth or young people, adolescents that they're looking for support. Like, do you support people that have loved ones of all ages? And
Yes.
are siblings able to go too?
Absolutely, yeah. So our supports, specifically, our participants have to be over the age of 18. So we can only take adults, but if it's adult siblings that maybe have, younger siblings that they're supporting, we can absolutely have them join our groups and programs. The age of loved one, whatever diagnosis or not diagnosis, no diagnosis or referrals are needed at all. We're kind of just open to anyone who's looking for support.
Wonderful, great. And we had a question here of how do you create boundaries without creating ultimatums? Where is the balance? We hear that quite often too in our support group.
Mm. Yeah, I know for myself personally, I'm very fortunate to be able to have a real good conversations with my loved ones in sort of what their needs are and what my needs are as well. And I wouldn't even really call it compromise, but there's ways to talk about it where both of our needs are getting met in some way. And also understanding that boundaries aren't always going to um, make the other person happy or give a good reaction on the other side when we're setting boundaries. So our intentions can always be, to be good and have that connection. And at the same time, sometimes they need to come in place to sort of give us that space to breathe and take a pause and really, honor our values and our time and energy. So I don't really have a specific answer of how that works, but that's just how it's kind of worked in my family. And again, it can kind of look different for everyone. Um, but yeah, really taking a look at your own values and how much you want to give and take in the world. That's sort of how I go about things.
Yeah, and sometimes I find even changing the language from boundaries to limits, like that has been
Mhm.
something similar to when you change it from but to and, like it just lands softer, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and knowing your limits is huge, right? Knowing what your capacity is. And that's why when we talk about boundaries in our groups and programs, it really is focused on us, and we're not trying to make it about what our loved ones are doing. It's just this is what I need in order to take care of myself, and we really turn it back on ourselves.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
And when is your next skills program happening? Like the different groups that you offer? Like when is that? Times, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so our support and skills groups, the drop-in groups happen once a month online and once a month in person. So usually the second Tuesday of the month is our in-person group in Langley. Second Tuesday of the month is the third Tuesday of the month is our online group, and that takes place on Zoom from 7 to 8:30 p.m. For both of those. And then our next essential skills program is, I believe, scheduled to take place sometime in September, about late September. And again, this is a 6-week program. We usually try to deliver it on Wednesday evenings. Again, it'll be around like 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. So they're usually about 2-hour long courses.
Great, thank you so much. I noticed that Deb has her hand up if you wanted to. Um, she would like to offer some compliments
Hi, Deb.
or comments.
Hi, it was great hearing your presentation. Thank you very much. I am the loved one of someone who has, or I have a loved one with BPD. Bailey is my daughter, for those who don't know. And boundaries is still something that I struggle with, but something I did hear the other day that I found to help reframe my understanding of boundaries is focusing on that aspect of what are my boundaries rather than trying to control the other person's actions. It's more, where is my line? What am I trying to, what boundaries am I setting for my life, and not allowing people to cross those boundaries, as opposed to setting a boundary for someone else and not allowing them to cross that boundary. It just
Totally.
flipped it for me. So it helped me, and I still have to continue working on that. But it really changed how I think of what boundaries are, what it means, and how to set them. I also know that I have to be consistent with my boundaries. I can't just, today it's a boundary, tomorrow it's not a boundary, because that can be really confusing for everyone. It's not effective. And around validation, I'm a big supporter of using validation and avoiding invalidation. When I go out to the community and talk about validation, I like to describe it as you being a fire extinguisher. If you know anything about putting out a flame, you don't aim your fire extinguisher at the top of a flame, which in this case could be people's behaviors, how they're reacting to things. You aim it at the base of the flame, and that is the emotion that's causing the emotions to escalate. So keeping in mind that I am a fire extinguisher and I'm aiming at the base of the flame, being the emotion piece, identifying as best I can what it is and talking to it, and acknowledging that I hear the emotion that's being talked about or that's being expressed. So
Yeah, I'm
offering.
very passionate about validation and helping families too. So,
I
thank
will, I will say that years ago, when Bailey was first being diagnosed, she came out of a counseling session almost a changed person. And I said, what went on in there? And she said, they validated me. It's like, whoa, okay, I better find out what this is all about. And been a big, big supporter of that ever since. So thanks. I'm glad to hear you guys really are out there helping other family members learn and understand validation in particular. Thanks.
you.
Thank you,
Yeah, I
Deb.
really appreciate your organization too, like that you're very collaborative and you have amazing programs and that you're filling in a need in the community. Yeah. And was there any other kind of last thoughts before I handed it over to Brian for the next part of our presentation today?
Yeah, no, just again, thank you for allowing me to come share sort of what we talk about. And again, the skills I had to breeze through pretty quickly because there are so many and each one of them could have its own program. We say that all the time. So we really do encourage people to reach out, give it a go. And again, we don't really have wait lists or anything like that. So we will try to be, as quickly responsive as possible. And again, no referrals or specific diagnoses are needed to access our groups and programs. So we're really here for people, and we just want to get as many people supported and empowered to take care of themselves as possible. So thank you for allowing me to share that.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lauren, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you. You as well. Enjoy the rest of the Awareness Day. This is amazing.
Lauren works as the Community and Programs Coordinator for Emotions BC, focusing on the operations and growth of their groups and programs,